Welcome to the Pure Property Podcast. Whether you are considering buying your first investment property or reaching property mogul status, we dissect the fundamentals through to large-scale property development and everything in between.
G'day, hey guys, Phil Tarrant here. Welcome to the Pure Property Podcast with Paul Glossop. I forget how many P's are in this podcast, but I don't mind P's. P's are good. Got to mind your P's and Q's, Paul Glossop. But I see, again, you've arrived in my studio late with a coffee for yourself and some water for yourself and some random guy that you found on the street. What's going on? Welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you. Happy New Year. But you know me well enough, Phil, to know that my coffees are typically about 4 hours old.
Yeah,
so
correct.
If you wanted that same coffee, it would be ice cold with zero sugar and flavour.
You can tell a lot about a person by the coffee that they drink.
Tell me more.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know what a man who sips a coffee for 4 hours stone cold, because I cop a lot of grief everywhere I go about it, but I'm pretty sure you're a similar man.
I'm very, very similar. So you can tell a lot about how someone invests in property by how they drink their coffee. You, sir, are considered, slow, deliberate. You make sure it's right, and you savor your success.
And my water bottle's empty, by the way.
Yeah.
It's just
that's
product placement.
Another side, you know. It just makes you look good. Yeah, he's really healthy. People tuning in wherever you're watching this or listening into it, and I know a lot of this is on audio, so I need to paint a picture for you all. But he's sitting here with all his stuff lined up.
I don't know about
like
the coffee that my homeless friend here that I've brought in drinks. To be fair,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's short black, and doesn't necessarily drink it cold because he's of the European descent.
You know what? This is an epiphany that I had probably about 5 years ago. I was at a big defence conference, like an arms show, call it that, right? And where we do a fair bit in that space. But and I'd been out on the night before, and I was ruined. I was out sort of, drinking with some officers from the Royal Navy. Hot tip, never do it. Anyway, I was broken, and I had to arrive at this thing in the morning, and I was really, really wounded. Like, I was sort of really hungover. I should have stayed in bed for weeks, right? And I think I did after it. Anyway, I managed to put on a suit, arrived looking good, and I think he's one of your clients, Will McGee. He
Yes.
goes, Phil, I'll fix you up, mate. Took me over to this coffee stand and gave me this double espresso with just a little splash of water, and he said, just pound that.
And that was you.
And I went, bam. And then every morning now I start
Changed.
with, even when I'm travelling through France, I stand at the bar like a good Frenchman would do and get my coffee.
Minus
my
the
cafe,
cigarette.
and I sit there. I don't have a lung in the morning. But my coffee taste now, I like a quick, short injection of capital growth.
Yep.
And then I'll just sit there
And
and,
then,
let it
a
brew
sustain,
over.
a
Then
sustainable.
It's sustain. Just
Yep.
top it up during the day.
Yep.
And then I hit the champagne at night,
Oh,
which is good. That's what
Gotcha.
you should do.
Right,
That's
what-
the system.
well, I reckon we've got the right person to attest or deny those
Yeah.
facts as we speak.
So, Gerald Touchard, did I get that right?
That's it.
I
That's
struggle with, as much as I try and get people's names right, I do struggle with fancy European names with inflections and stuff, or I don't know what you call them, those little squiggles and stuff you put above your name.
Yeah,
But
never been told that my name was fancy, so
mate, very fancy. Sounds fancy.
beautiful.
Yeah, but you still got a funny sort of. You've been here a while in Australia, but you still sound like a Frenchman. You're an Aussie now, so
I
you've got
am,
the
yeah.
passport and stuff.
Yeah.
Are you French Australian or are you Australian French?
French Australian.
French Australian.
Yeah, I got my citizenship end of last year.
Okay. Oh, congratulations.
Only took 20 years.
How did you
that's good.
celebrate that?
I went to Mr. Wong at
Yeah.
a nice boozy dinner with a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
So.
What you should be doing is getting a slab of VB, sitting on a park bench, drinking it, and then fighting some local, and then you're a real Australian.
That was the second option, but Mr. Wong. won, so.
Mr. Wong, no, you've probably done better with Mr. Wong, I reckon. But mate, that's good news. And so, why are you, Paul? Why is Gerard with us today? Tell me what's going on.
Well, we typically, as we've sort of exposed a fair few different investors through the Pure Property Investment Podcast, the intention of our podcast, as we've discussed over the months, is to really not necessarily talk about strategy and fundamentals and different things that people could or maybe should consider. We want to talk about real life examples as to how people have started, what the struggles have been, where the sacrifices are, and go over a long period of time. Not just I bought this property last last month. I hope it does well. Let's reconnect in 5 years and figure it out. Gerald has been, I've known Gerald, who initially was a client of ours, became a good friend, and also has become now a work colleague within Pure Property Investment, has a story that I think is not only unique, but is also a story of exactly what we just talked about, is playing the long game with the coffee, but is also quite an interesting one because it talks about how you traverse not necessarily just by buying property and holding and replicating, but it's got international assets, it's got off-the-plan assets, it's got commercial assets, it's got residential assets, it's got sale, it's got equity extraction. Most of all, it's got a long time frame to really explain how staying in the game, making strategic decisions, sacrificing can lead to some pretty big things from pretty modest beginnings. Not dissimilar to where you and I both started, Phil.
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing Gerald in. It sounds like a good guess. And it's surprising how often you hear people start investing in property and then transition their career into property investment. It sounds like you're very much so. What's you obviously didn't grow up to be a buyer's agent. What's your craft? What's your trade?
Yeah, so I'm a chef.
Okay. Could this get any more cliche?
No.
Sorry, I like the French. By the
He
way.
also owns a poodle.
I do not.
Sorry.
I was a chef in France. Came to Australia 20 years ago. Started working in like fine dining restaurant. Got sponsor, and moved quite quickly to catering, and then that led me to working in chalet in Europe. So I was running like a chalet, and then that kind of led me to working on yachts, and that just keep going. That's private kind of road, and start working as a private chef. Opened my company like a few years ago, and do basically private dinners around Sydney. And
you don't do that anymore, do you?
No, I still do that. Yeah.
I can attest to, and I'll give him a plug, Northern Beach's private chef. I can attest that Gerald's done a couple of team building things with the team over.
I might need
I was going to say, you might have your number one client here, which might lead to far more work than I want you to take on with the chefing business.
So
but
is that the
fantastic.
side hustle, is it? Or is that the main game?
Passion.
Passion. Yeah.
Okay.
I love what I do. I love cooking, love hosting, but also love property. So you know what? Like I'm gonna do all my events on weekends anyway with private chefing, so I'm gonna learn more about property, working as a buyer's agent, and I just really
Sounds
enjoying
like it
doing
works.
both.
It's funny. Everyone, I know a lot of buyer's agents, right? Like I probably know more buyer's agents than anyone else around because of what I do for a living, and there is no set path to becoming a buyer's agent. Everyone arrives there through their own pathway. But like most things, and I don't know how we can continue to do this, Paul, but we're able to turn anything into a property analogy, right? We just did it with coffee, but I would say that the disciplines and the routines and the perfection of being a fine dining chef would lend to you a set of skills which you would be able to use very well as a buyer's agent, and that's very much around preparation. You know, the diligence and the discipline of creating fine dining. It's just not like a great steak arrives on your plate. There's everything from acquiring the supply chain to get the ingredients through to the preparation of the ingredients, the sequence that you put those ingredients together to create a product which is of benefit. And I'd say, hadn't really thought too much about it beforehand, but that chef discipline is a really good apprenticeship for applying that into the process of really effective acquisition of property. I don't know. You're probably doing it without even knowing it.
Yeah.
Probably one of the best analogies, I reckon. The mise en place.
Mise en place.
That analogy for me, just as you're saying this, that actually makes so much sense.
And the team that you use, right? Like you got sous chefs, you got even a guy who's washing the plates at the end of the process, right? It's a start to finish. Start to finish, repeat. And you don't want to deviate from that. Once you get, I know chefs like to, they like to experiment, right? But once you get something right and you're the business of chefing, you want to get that stuff out with quality all the time to the people that want it, and you just want to repeat. It's good discipline.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
There's your new book, the Chef's Guide to Property Investing. It'd be a better seller than the Surfer's Guide
Cooking
to
your
Property
way to
Investing.
financial freedom.
Cooking your way to financial.
I mean, we do say, it's 90%, 90% prep, 10% service.
Yeah.
And, I think that's really true in the kitchen, and that's also really true in property.
Yeah.
Like all the research you do and, all the work to buy a property, like buying the property is, it's
very small
it's
bit of
easy. It's, signing a few documents. But getting your finance ready, like looking at the right place to buy, when is a right place to buy, which place is going to fit your portfolio really well. Like all this research, it's 90% of the work who makes that 10% magic.
It's good. Good answer. Let's explore this, right? I've got a bit of paper here. So the steps of cooking food, I'd say the key bits is the food arrives and it gets eaten, right? Food arrives and eaten. There's all this stuff beforehand, right? So how do you make a really good fine dining experience for someone? So let's just call it a main course, right? Where would you start doing that? Tell me about that. What's the first bit you would do?
I mean, yeah, good question. The first bit is, sourcing the ingredients.
Yeah.
Which, I spend a lot of time doing because I'm really passionate about, the produce, where it come from, not just going to Coles and just buying, any piece of meat or piece of fish or, fruit there. Like you can go to a fish market to buy a piece of fish, and, there is six or seven different places you can buy fish, and there's only one I will use for that type of fish, So finding the right ingredients, that's a start. But the way I work is, I will talk to my clients and say, you have a dinner party, a birthday, like, what do you want? Like, like if you could travel anywhere and bring your friends with you, like, where will you go, And sometimes they say, oh, we love to go to Italy, love to go to France. And I said, well, let's create a menu that's going to reflect that.
So you start with what the objective is.
Yeah.
That is,
yeah.
what do you want to create for the outcome that you want?
Yeah, and what memory do you want to bring? Like it's, and that's what I love about what I do. It's not I cook the food I want to cook, or I get inspired by my clients who say, we've been to that restaurant in Monaco. Oh, we loved it. I said, oh yeah, I spent a bit of time there, and then I will know vaguely what they're talking about, so we can start creating, a dish or a menu around that. So wine, like a lot of my clients, they've got like really beautiful wine, and they hear, we love to have this beautiful wine with beautiful food, and they get a beautiful bottle of Burgundy, and I'm here. Yeah, I know what I can do with that.
Steak and chips,
no.
Diane sauce.
steak and chips. Don't worry about it. I went to a restaurant yesterday. I won't say which one it was. Don't have a fryer.
Wow.
It was like a fancy joint. We had like the lamb and the beef to share, right? I just wanted some fries with it. Like you want steak frites, right? That's it. Couldn't get it. Sickened. I had to get a potato rosti. Wasn't happy. I was sickened. And I don't normally eat a lot of carbs. I was like, mate, I'm having steak frites tonight. So they didn't give me what I want. The outcome was wrong, right? But back to chefing. So you would start with what is the objective?
Yeah.
Like when you start down a property journey, what is the objective? And I imagine. Not to dwell too much on this, but I think it's really good to understand the sequence of stuff. You need to know what that objective is before you can go and find the right stuff to meet that objective. So it'll be the same. I want to create wealth through property and do this, so therefore I need to find these type of assets. But I imagine also there's a seasonality of this as well, right? So
100%.
you might not be able to find that type of food today because it's not in the season, it's not available, it's not accessible. Much like property markets, you might want a particular outcome today, but those things don't, and they're not available right now. It's very hard if you're new to property investing, unless you've got massive deposits, to find cash flow positive properties, because interest rates are so high. It's very, very difficult. So the seasonality of cooking, of chefing, the seasonality of property is all interconnected. And no doubt then you've got the discipline to be able to create a fine dining
And
experience
to add
that people are happy
another
with.
layer there, Phil, that's again, you plumb with analogies. You've been reading your analogy book in the off season.
I wrote the book around analogies, but I do like finding an analogy inside of stuff.
But this is key because I mean the amount of times, Gerald, you could attest to this that with our clients at Pure Property Investment. I mean the amount of times we've got clients who have a bias towards a particular area because they live it, they know it, they want it.
I want steak frites.
Exactly. Like, mate, you're in a restaurant that does things over coal. We don't have a fryer. You came here for this. We'll give you something that's going to be sensational. But to the point, people may live in Melbourne or Sydney or Canberra right now. They might want because they've seen it do what it's done over the last 3 or 4 years. And the data doesn't suggest that's probably going to be the best fit for the next 3 or 4 years. You're trying to get Mooloolaba prawns in the winter. They're probably not going to be caught. Or there's a cyclone going through right now. Probably want to consider some oysters somewhere else. Those types of things. That these analogies are thick and fast.
Really the last thing you want though is a Chinook salmon.
Ooh.
You want to leave that to someone else.
Not in this country either.
Not
It's going to be frozen.
It's going to be frozen and a bit ropey. But so are you allowed to have two passions? Sounds like you have a passion for property and a passion for
many.
cooking.
I've got many passion.
Really? What else do you like to do?
Love surfing.
Yeah, okay.
Love riding motorbike.
Did you read his book, Surfer's Guide to Property
I
Investor?
did.
There's a new book, new installment coming out. He's been working on it all over the summer.
I did. I read it like a few years ago.
It was really, really hard to draw analogies around surfing and property. I had to work really, really hard, and it was around preparation. Make sure you fit. Make sure you got the right board, the right thing. Getting out's difficult. You got to plan your paddle out. It depends on the conditions, the tide, the wind. Did I get all this right? Is this correct? Is that right?
Sure, Phil.
Yeah. And then surfing the waves, like probably 3% of it all, but that's the good bit, right? Maybe that's the capital growth.
Oh, it probably is. Yeah. That's the elation. That's
the elation.
Equity extraction or selling the property.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know how this is. I'm going to have to work hard to try and. I don't know. Maybe we've got to do big wave surfing or something. That's probably a different level of preparation.
Maybe something.
Right? That's commercial investing, is it?
Possibly developing.
Yeah. Tailwinds.
Tailwinds. There you go.
What's the jet ski of the property world?
Jet ski, the
buyer's
property world.
agent, is it? Is the jet ski the buyer's agent towing you onto stuff?
Business ownership, I tell you what, that is kind of it. There's some big ups and downs there that comes with all of it. But I mean, I guess I'll let you stay with Gerald here because I think his story is something that's
it's a lot more interesting than yours personally.
Completely. I think the audience would attest to that.
It feels a lot more rich,
organic.
But so you arrive in Australia, to cook. Well, so you arrive out here just on a wayward backpacking trip, or
you'd already bought. So that venture in Europe took you to your first property in Europe, though, did it not?
Yeah, no.
Prior to arriving in Australia, or was it you here and then you went back?
Yeah, so I arrived here in 2003. Yeah, no backpacking for me, unfortunately. There was no visa for France and Australia back then. So arrived as on holiday. Quickly tried to get a sponsor. Work in Circular Quay in one of the restaurants there. Got a sponsor, and then
So you had pretty good credentials as a chef.
Yeah, I worked in Michelin star restaurant in England and in France. So yeah, I was.
So you're marketable. Did people go, "Yeah, we want you"? And they grab you straight away.
Yeah, I think 20 years ago, I think anything who came from France and with had a knife in his hand,
you've got a job.
Yeah,
you weren't flipping burgers at McDonald's, right?
Yeah.
So you arrived here after all this experience in Europe with a view to come and live here or stay here. Or?
Yeah, I think the goal was to spend about 2 years here. And within the first 6 months, I was like, "Nah, I'm not
This
gonna.
is it.
Yeah, I'm gonna stay longer than 2 years."
Yeah.
Like during the last 20 years, I spent a lot of time going back to Europe, working in Europe on yachts. For about 6 years, my wife and I we did 6 months in Europe and 6 months in.
Was she working on yachts as well?
Yeah, she started working on yachts with me as well, and
that all sounds very glamorous, but what I understand is pretty hard work.
It's extremely hard work, but we have like great memories, and realistically, like that's how we kind of funded our first property, and and probably like helping supporting the property portfolio after that. That's yachting career. We had like some really amazing people we work for, and they paid us really well. We worked really hard, but
so where was your first property?
So my first property was in just outside Paris, a little studio apartment on a ring road of Paris, northeast. Like just very, very simple, 30 square meter studio.
It's a pretty standard French Paris studio.
Yeah.
Do you still have it?
No, I sold it. I sold it a year and a half ago. But I bought two over there, kind of like a year apart.
Okay.
And then
using the money that you created working on yachts in
no,
in the Med,
that
or?
was like just from working. So that was started working on yachts 2010, and around this time, bought the first one and the second one quite quickly
with a mortgage.
With a mortgage,
Yeah. What do you call a mortgage in France? Because mortgage is means death pledge, right?
Good question.
Yeah, okay, there you go. I'll leave that.
Come back to it.
Yeah. Sorry, it's probably a bit of a. I was just curious, right? So you had a mortgage in. So you had a mortgage.
Yeah.
Like, do you remember? Was it really high interest rates? Is it is it sort of the same or different than here?
So it's so different. So I was first place. I was considering buying in Australia or France. And I remember the interest rate being here, like, we're quite high. And in France, they were around that 4% fixed loan for the entire time of the loan. So 20 years at 4% fixed.
That's like in America.
And so, back then it made sense to buy. They didn't do like extremely well over time, but it was a good learning. Yeah, it was a good learning experience. Buying and dealing with property manager in France, which they're not all the best. And then bought a second one like the year after, and then the interest rate kind of went down over time, and you could just like go back to the bank and say, okay, we want to drop down the interest to what it is now. So you pay a little bit for that, but then we had it down to 2%.
Okay.
For like
forever.
18 years or 15 years.
God. Sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
So a couple of properties in Paris.
Yep.
So when did you start your property journey investing in Australia? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So 2012.
So you've been at this for a while. Like 2012 is 12 years ago. Like that's quite a long time ago.
Yeah. So, but back then, like my knowledge on property, especially in Australia, was very limited. I kind of felt like Sydney had to, have a boom because nothing was really happening since when I arrived to 2012. I was like, it's just cheap. It just feels cheap. So anyway, I bought a off the plan.
Off the plan is
Sydney, so in Waterloo.
Okay.
The government was doing like first home grant, no stamp duty. So you're like, that's 25 grand, just free money.
It's not free money. I paid for it in some sort of tax. I paid,
no doubt.
Probably.
Thanks, Phil.
Yeah, no worries. You're welcome.
Anytime. But there is always a catch with that.
Yeah.
So bought off the plan, 1-bedroom apartment, Waterloo.
Yeah. With the 5,000 other 1-bedroom apartments in Waterloo.
5,000. Yeah. They're like and the other.
Yeah.
But you know what? Like we my wife and I have moved in it. We had our first son,
Cool.
and no regrets there. The property market during that time did quite well as well. So we did off the plan 2012, finished building in 2015, and like probably during 2012 and 2016, 17, like Sydney did really well.
Yeah. So what did you buy in at, and what was the valuation after completion?
Yeah. So again, we got lucky. Like we got lucky with the timing.
Yeah.
On that one, but yeah, we bought for 465, and then by the time we actually purchased, like a few years later, like it was probably in the 520, 530.
Okay.
So the valuation worked in our favor, which was good.
But is there a but? Do you still have the property?
I could. Well, I'll let Gerard answer that because there's a bit more there. But I think for me, and we were talking about this off air, Gerard and I, is that time is fantastic in property, and that's a classic example. And I guess you could look at that in two different ways. You say, look, we made a decision, we did something, we could have done nothing and achieved nothing, and as it turns out, you bought for mid-4s, valuation came in at sort of low to mid-5s. At completion, you put a very modest deposit on. There was a whole bunch of grants that came with it. So you essentially probably, by sitting on the sidelines for 2 or 3 years as it was being constructed, probably made yourself 75, 80, 100 grand.
And the point is, how much money did you need to put in to control that opportunity for 2.5 to 3 years?
Yeah, not too much. So it was like the 5,000 deposit, and I had to put on my credit card straight away, as you do. And then I had to come up with, I think it was 10% deposit within like the first couple of months. So I didn't have all the money. I knew I was going to go work on yachts. So I scrambled all the money I had and then went to the bank and asked for a personal loan. And then that was a 10% deposit.
Okay.
And then I knew then in 2 years' time I had to come up with another 10% and also a job with payslip, so I could get a loan.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did all that.
So you did it, made it.
Yeah.
So 80. So we're talking sort of 80, 85-ish grand in total. If we're talking sort of 20% of the mid-4s.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess going back to where you sort of look at this, where essentially you controlled an asset that grew in value without really putting much down, but then you can look at in reflection as your journey, as the audience will hear, it's evolved dramatically over the years. And Phil, you bought in Sydney in that exact time. I bought a lot in Sydney. As a company, we bought a lot in Sydney at that time, but again, established freestanding houses. I know full well that freestanding houses out west at that time that we were buying were probably circa 300K, 350.
Maybe.
And there was a few a bit cheaper, and I know I can think of a few that were sort of mid-2s.
Mid-2s to low 3s.
And you sort of reflect back, but there's this, like, they would have probably doubled or tripled the performance of that. And I'm not going to say, well, you should have done something different, because ultimately, even if that was something that you had the knowledge at the time, you still need to come up with real cash. So this is where an off-the-plan scenario versus buying an established property with a 6-week settlement, as much as that would have performed exponentially better, it's irrelevant because you couldn't have achieved it. And it's interesting because, you talk about what you do in again, if you had that opportunity to buy that property again, would you do it? Well, if you say no, I would have bought that, but you couldn't have done it. You couldn't have bought an established freestanding house. And that's why there's so many different ways to really explore how to build a portfolio.
But the risk factor, which you find out later, your question was really good. How did the property and the LVR go at settlement? Like, we could have gone an opposite scenario where, if we bought, let's say 5 years later in 2017, when the price were really high and then the price started going down for, a few years. So if you buy off the plan, when the market is hot and you're on top and then the market start going down, you have to come up with a lot more deposits, I probably will not buy off the plan. Like, looking back, it was probably very risky. It worked out well. I don't think I will do it again.
A lot of and the government puts incentives around sort of new build properties, right? Because they want to stimulate building, and building means jobs, right? So the government's got objectives there, and a lot of people will only buy off the plan apartments. So culturally, some cultures only want to buy brand new properties, right? That's just what they do, and that's fine. And I know a lot of people who have done extremely well buying off the plan, but you're sort of rolling the dice a little bit, right? There's a lot of stuff you can't control, and you find it, and it happens in different cycles that people end up in immediate negative equity at the point of at the point of settlement, where they sign a contract for $600,000. This thing gets built. Sometimes they don't get built in the year that they say. Ends up 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. That means you tie up deposits for that period of time, which you could have deployed elsewhere. But then at the point of settlement, and the bank goes, yeah, that's only a $500,000 property. That's not a $600,000 property. So you're still contractually obliged to complete the settlement and find another $100,000 in order to transact, and it happens as well. So it is a risk.
Yeah.
It absolutely is a risk.
And in terms of timing, you lose your job during that time, and then you don't have the pay slip. Like they give you a few months notice to say, we're gonna settle then, but like it is a very high risk strategy, and looking back now, I probably won't do again.
Did they build the apartment as you expected? Because another sort of risk. There's another risk aspect to this, is that it's a year late, but did they actually put the appliances in that they said they would put in? Did they actually do the finishes that were actually in the showroom? Because a lot of the times people move in and go, this is like, I was pitched this high quality stuff, but they've given me this. And you sit there and go, well, the contract says we can change it. So is what you got is what was delivered?
Yeah. What we got is what got delivered.
Yeah.
But the finishing of the build was okay. Could have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
But it wasn't great either. Like it was a few issues there. Then we probably could have done a building report, like a peasant building when we bought. We didn't. I didn't know about it. But that would have been a lot easier to kind of go back to the company and say, here's a defect, just fix it.
Yeah, and they would have made that. They don't always really accommodate. And at the other end of the scale in terms of risk, and I know the governments, state governments, in particular, are focused on this. You've had these big tower blocks like the one out at Olympic Stadium, which is still uninhabitable. Is that correct?
Well, I think
that's at the worst extreme of things going wrong.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people tying up dough there.
Yeah.
There'd be a 10-year period of money tied up in these developments. There's always class actions and all this sort of stuff, and hopefully they'll realise their money back. But it's a learning experience, though.
Yeah.
And you need a bit of scar tissue is good as a property investor.
And it evolved to a lot after that, I guess, as well, which obviously we'll explore.
So what was next after your Waterloo off the plan?
So after the Waterloo,
you still have the property?
No, I sold it.
Okay.
I sold it. So I was working for these clients in Vaucluse, and they were doing really well for themselves, and they've been investing in industrial and commercial property for a long time. So when speaking with them, they were like, you should consider buying commercial. So I was like, okay, don't know too much about commercial, but in terms of cash flow and yield, it does make sense. So I started looking at expert in commercial property in Sydney to help me buy, because I didn't know anything. So that's how I came up meeting Paul. So the objective was to buy commercial, and then when we start going down through finance with a broker, it was like, look, you need to keep building your residential portfolio first, and then you can go to commercial later. So I bought. So as a client, I bought two property with Paul.
When was that, Gerard? That was 2019?
Yeah, 2019. Yeah. March and April 2019. So bought one in near Launceston, and then bought one in Kalanga in North Brisbane.
Yeah. You've probably done well out of both of them.
Yeah, so release equity from that Waterloo property, put a little bit more money in, and then we bought this, two property. And then when we were talking about that Waterloo property with Paul, he was like, look, you can keep it, but don't expect to have, it's not going to perform extremely well. So I did my research, and I was just like, well, we can keep it, we can sell it. It became an investment property by then. We were not living in it anymore, so it's just like, okay, let's sell it. Let's use whatever money is left from the property to buy another one. And then we bought one in Forestville in Western Australia in Perth. And that was like just before COVID. So we sold when COVID was starting, becoming a thing. So there was like March, April 2020. And then we bought that property in Forestville a couple of months later. But during that following 12 months, that property in Forestville made, under 20K. That property that I sold in Waterloo is probably still around the same than where I sold it.
So it sounds like the right decision.
And I think that decision, to be fair, wasn't a flippant one. I mean, we had multiple meetings, strategy meetings over that throughout the years, and that was from the first meeting talking about whether it's commercial, whether it's residential, before any decisions are made. Before we even made that decision, the key was finance, and this goes back to that initial analogy of mise en place and the preparation is we have to figure out where's the funding, how much can we borrow, how much can you get out of Waterloo, and that led to the decision of saying commercial is probably not right now. It's not never, but it's not right now. And that led to then, equity extraction, 2 markets at the time that we had some strong focus that had to fit a budget because your budget wasn't unlimited.
No, it was pretty small, yeah.
And we also had to focus on cash flow because cash flow wasn't rife. There wasn't, we weren't just saying, hey, look, we happy with blue chip, happy to lose 10, 15, 20 grand a year. We couldn't really, we're trying to find, hey, what options are going to give us best of both? And Launceston, what did we pay for the Newnham property at the time? And it was in the twos.
275.
275.
In 2019. Yeah, you've
And
probably
what's that worth now? That'd be 5.
Just above 5. Yeah, 510, I think.
That's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And
it's not going to go anywhere from here. It's going to stick at that number now for the next 10 years.
But it's also what's it
probably
renting
yields
for?
pretty well.
It's renting for be 4s to 5s.
Yeah. Well, when we bought it for 275. 2019 it was rented as 320. So the yield back then was 6%. So it was pretty good. The value 5 years later is 510. Is renting for 430. So we took equity out, but if we left it as is, it's a yield at 8.15.
Yeah, it'd be positively geared if you didn't refinance it.
Yeah, exactly.
And what is it now? Does it cost you to hold it before tax?
I mean, the portfolio altogether is a little bit negative, but not too bad.
And that's not the entire. So there's more in the portfolio since then as well. Just going on Kalanga, so guys, I know we bought pretty close to the same time. What did we pay for Kalanga? It was in the 3s, was it?
Yeah. So Kalanga is 345.
Yeah.
Was rented as 330, so it was a yield at 5%. It's worth about 620 now. It's rented for 480. Again. If we didn't refinance, the yield will probably be at 7.25 now. In just under 5 years.
Yeah. And that was that inflection point. I guess that goes back to, and there's a lot of listeners, and I spend a lot of my time when we catch up with clients who are in relatively similar positions saying, I hold this property, and I know we talked about this off air, Gerald, but it was your first property in Australia. There was a lot of passion into it. There was a lot of sacrifice. There was a lot of family emotion, you raise your first child, and all these things that we've all had them, that first property where you're kind of reluctant to want to release it. But the decision was there, and it wasn't just you wanted to sell that property. I mean, we essentially didn't need to sell to buy those first 2, but you did have to get the equity out, and then essentially you were at a roadblock then. But that decision to push and stretch led from, could have just stayed in there, kept that as your investment, rented, tried to buy your own home and gone down that path, which wouldn't have been a terrible one, but essentially making that decision doubled the asset value, kept the cash flow relatively neutral, and has also led to other assets from that as well. And that's part of that ongoing conversation and not just being comfortable with status quo.
Yeah, exactly. And, with my wife, we had our first child, so she wasn't working back then. So then we had our second child. So we couldn't, going to see the bank and asking for money with one salary and two kids. It was, I don't even know how the broker managed to get finance, and they still get us finance now. And I'm here they've done an incredible job to manage to get us, the finance every time.
Yeah.
But also, we had to be talking about sacrifices. When it's you and your partner, you both have to be on the same line. Then there is a goal. It's going to be a better tomorrow. But there is some years of sacrifices where you can't spend money. You have to show the banks, and you've got a tight ship. You're not spending money everywhere. So you can get us a bit more borrowing.
So are you still investing now? So have you gone in the commercial yet, or?
Yeah.
So when was that? How was that?
So the commercial was when I joined Pure Property. So that was a year ago now. We bought the commercial, and we bought another one in Perth.
In super or outside of super?
No, all personal.
Oh, okay.
All personal.
Yeah. So you bought commercial in Perth?
No, bought another residential in Wycombe in WA.
Yep.
And pretty much in the same time bought the commercial in Brisbane.
Okay. And what sort of commercial? Just industrial?
No, just like kind of like a office, but like in, I don't even know how to describe it.
It's a boutique block. Yeah. Long lease, small block. Design, it could have development overlay at some stage. Really good cash flow property, good long tenant, good location, and really quite robust when it comes down to being a little bit defensive. It's probably straddles somewhere between the Gold Coast and Brisbane, so it's not Brisbane proper, Brisbane CBD type of asset.
But we kind of need this commercial to boost the cash flow. Because like the residential portfolio was kind of negative, and we need to inject some cash flow into it. So that's when the commercial kind of made sense. So
commercial does make sense. I like commercial. It's
at points in time. At points in time, and I think that's when it came down to that. You've worked with the same broker throughout the years, and the original advice was it's not the right time. The cash flow, as much as it'll help, it's not going to help the borrowing to build the portfolio, because cash flow, as we know, it's not necessarily there to give you an income initially anyway. It's there to essentially hold the portfolio to get that longer term return and then eventually get the income. But again, you've done just gone straight to commercial. You sort of split that between commercial and resi, and that was via the extraction of the Tasmanian and Kalanga assets.
Yeah, and selling one of the property in Paris as well.
Yeah, correct. So taking some cash off the table, taking equity off the table. And at that time, did you sell Waterloo, or that came after you bought those two properties?
No, we sold Waterloo in 2020. So
that had also gone. So that released a bit of borrowing capacity at that time as well. And obviously tax-free profit because you had lived in that property.
There was no capital gain,
Yeah. So it sounds like you're just really beginning your property investing journey.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, that's not it either, is it? Right?
I mean, look, the thing is, I think we've done the hardest was the beginning. Like saving as saving as first deposit. Buying the first property, understanding how it works. Like at the beginning, it is painful. And especially when you don't have the knowledge, you have to rely on advice, but good advice, which is like unfortunately you've got like a lot of people around you. We always talk about that's on call, or your in-laws or your friends. Everybody's got the best interests in mind when they give you advice, but the reality is, most of the times, this advice are not the best.
Yeah.
And I my wife and I got really lucky with, we met Paul. He's a good guy. They did well with the two property we bought through them. Introduced us to a good broker. We share the same accountant as well, but. Introducing to Munzerul, which
your account, is he?
Yeah,
Oh,
which like the advice we got from that circle of people. Was
you need
just
to pay
incredible.
for good advice. And you make a good point. Family and friends, they want the best for you, but they don't necessarily always give you the best advice when it comes to stuff that they're not really that knowledge around. But people like Munzerul's a great accountant.
Yeah.
No one else is allowed to use him now because I want him prioritising my stuff.
Yeah, he's a busy man. He's
He's very, very good though.
But it's also like you have to get your advice from the people who have what you want. Like if you go to the gym and you want like a very fit body, you're not gonna get a fat a personal trainer. You're gonna go to the guy who has your body than you like. In property is the same. Like if you want to build a portfolio of property, and get like that financial freedom, you can't get that advice from, your uncle who lived in his house all his life, because that's what he has. Like good or bad, but if that's the direction you want to go, and he has what you want, that's great. But if that's not what you want, then you need to get your advice from people who actually have what you're after.
You must have working on. I'm just conscious of time, but working on boats and chalets and stuff. You must have been surrounded by very wealthy people for periods of time. Being a fly on the wall. Did they talk about making money much?
Oh yeah, I always ask them.
Yeah.
It's a pretty personal job what I was doing. So. I know a lot of their story, and how they made their money, how they're investing, and it's some great stories there, but also on another extent, their advice, for example, around the commercial, they had so much money. Then for them, it made sense to have all that money working for them into commercial and industrial assets.
Yeah.
But we didn't start at the same level.
No.
I started with, 150K. They started with probably multiple million. So their advice is not quite aligned to where I need them to be, because, I can't just go
apples
by...
and oranges, right?
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to, pay for advice and take inspiration from, everybody's story, what they've done well, and learn from it. But it doesn't mean you can necessarily apply it straight away.
So other than working with Paul, what do you like about being a buyer's agent these days?
I find it... I think it's two levels to the question. On a personal level, I'm learning a lot. As we were saying before, I spend, when I was working as a personal chef, I will spend 6-7 hours a day just listening to podcasts, property podcasts, and, just trying to understand, a strategy, where we can go. And if you do that for 3 years and listen, 6 hours of podcast every day.
It's an MBA, really.
Yeah, pretty much, and there's some good podcasts around, I was saying to you, SPI was one of my go-to as podcasts, but I've learned so much from it. And then, kind of wanted to, build my portfolio. And I was like, the best way to keep building it will be to work in property. And I just really like what Paul was doing. Obviously we had very good result with our property. And just like, I'm going to do my property license and ask for a job and, see how
was
it
the
goes.
recruitment process? Was it pretty stringent?
It was pretty low key.
If I can,
he's got a pulse, get him in.
and an accent. But if I can be honest, so Gerald is one of our key buyers agents with Lena, with Aaron, myself. Our team has grown organically with Courtney, with Debbie, with Kim in the background as well over the years. I actively, and I do get people ask for a job relatively frequently, and it's not by surprise. But I guess the reality is that we grow when I know strategically I kind of want that person. And the beauty about the reason why an interview process is very much not really something that we would hold ourselves needed. We were clients, we were friends. You understood property. You had a distinct passion to not have a job, but to learn and to deliver outcomes for clients, to essentially expel the knowledge that you get on a day in, day out basis. The other big thing, which I guess to your two-part answer to the kind of the question, and I think you could probably strongly attest to this, Gerard, is that as a company, as a team, we talk about property all day, every day, and not just for our clients, but for ourselves. What are we doing? Why are you doing that? How did you finance that? Why are you doing that renovation? Why are you selling that property? We literally talk about this stuff till we're blue in the face with passion, because I think we've all been very lucky to find something that we really enjoy doing. For the most part, on the way in here, I had an hour-long conversation with one of our best friends and also a broker, talking about a collective duo of properties. He's bought 3 properties. He's now got 10 of his neighbours on, and he's now got a nursing home next door who's looking at a $30 million option for his properties, which is a massive payday. Something we've been talking about him about for 5.5, 6 years. Almost bought into one of the properties. Again, this is just shooting the breeze non-stop about property, because it's such an enjoyable aspect. I work in it all day, every day, and have done so for the best part of 15 years. And I still love it because the knowledge, picking up things, talking about people who have done things that you want to do, or exploring things. I mean, we do this every day, which is one of the funnest things, I think, about what we do. And then you help people essentially better their lives financially as a byproduct of it all. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, for me, that's the second part. Like, just, talking to clients who are where I was, 5 years ago, and, they don't necessarily always have the full trust in what you do. Like, you have to put your trust in the hand of people you think they're going to deliver a good result for you. But yeah, like answering their question, trying to make them understand, and, like it's hard to see the full path when you're starting. So, like when we bought the first 2 property, like I really didn't know how we could go and keep buying more, but then, it happened pretty organically, but, it does happen. And, this conversation with client where, they've got their dads, they've got their set of ID, like, going back to your steak, they want to eat a steak frit, and you hear, oh, you could have a beautiful braised beef cheek with mashed potato, it's still the same, but it's, like 100 times better. And making them understand, and being so close to CBD is not necessarily better, or just buying in Sydney instead of Perth or Brisbane is not necessarily better, because it's just not the season, it's not the right time. And like we do portfolio review every year. So every December we sit down and we look at what the client bought a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years ago. And then we just kind of send them a report, and you look at every single client who bought, and the growth in the property they purchased, and they made a decision to buying like a few years back. You hear like it's it's really satisfying saying like you're part of that.
It's good. Well, you certainly have a passion for property, which is good. I couldn't do it. I get annoyed with property. Can't talk about it every day. I do actually on podcasts, but I get a bit frustrated with property sometimes. But that's the way it works.
But you typically, I've sort of knowing your portfolio, Phil, you've traded a few over the years, and you continue to do so. And sometimes that frustration is warranted, because you look at, you're like, it's just, this comes up too often for me to be comfortable with it. Maybe time to flip the script on that one. That one's gone. I'm going to replace it with something else, which I know is sort of part of your reshuffling process over the last few months.
It's all good. It's I like making money out of property. Yeah, I tell you that. I like
that's the meal eating part.
Yeah, that's all I want. I want the steak frits all day. I don't want to. I don't worry about anything. That's the reason why I pay people to do stuff for me, right? Like, because that you want people to do stuff for you that know what they're doing. They're better at doing than what you're doing it, and they care about the outcome, right? That's about getting the right team. So the problem I think you're going to have, Paul, is that people are going to tune into this and go, I don't want to use Paul Glossop anymore. I want to use this French bloke. He sounds a lot better.
to cook the steak frits, or to buy the decent property.
So how does it work in your business? Like, just
So typically when someone does contact us, and someone could jump online at purepropertyinvestment.com, inquire now, set up a time to chat with myself or with Aaron or one of our team members, essentially. The first part is exactly what we talked about. It's understand where we are. To Gerald's analogy, is like, where do we want to be? What season?
What do you want to eat?
What do you want to eat? And we have to figure out, okay, well, do we have the season? Do you have the budget to buy the product that is going to give you that satisfaction? And if not, then we maybe need to curate something slightly different. But essentially, it's that objective, that strategy. Once we get alignment there, and we know that funding can be in place, structures, all those things, that mise en place that we have talked about, once that's there, then it's over to our team in general. I mean, Gerald has his specificity in certain areas of which he is an expert on. Lena has an expert area of expertise where she is going to be focusing on, Aaron the same, myself the same. We don't necessarily say that everyone goes to one channel. It's saying, well, depending on what you've got in the portfolio, depending on what the budget says, depending on what we need next, then we're going to go into that area. And then that will then depend on who you're going to work with from a buyer's agency perspective. And that's always been the case. And that will always be the case because I don't hold all the secrets. If I want knowledge on particular areas in Brisbane right now, I'll go to Gerald. If I want knowledge on particular areas in the south of Perth right now, I'll go to Lena. If I want expertise in parts of Melbourne or parts of North Perth, I'll go to Aaron. If they want some expertise on certain areas outside of that, whether it's development sites in Sydney, commercial assets and arrange, the team will come to me. And that evolves. We deep dive very regularly as a business to try and figure out, are we staying in those markets? Are we going to new markets? And we've talked about this Fast 50 report that we're going to launch next month with SPI to Phil. And that will talk about some markets that we're going to focus on for the next 12 months.
I've actually seen the first run of the data. Very surprising.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's an interesting one for you, Phil, and for the listeners. And Gerald sort of let the cat out of the bag a little bit there in his portfolio. His Forestfield property, which is one of the key markets that probably was one of the top 4, top 5 performing suburbs 20, in Australia out of over 10,000 suburbs last year, of every single suburb we bought 4 years ago. Now, I guess what I'm
just saying,
just saying. But what I am also just saying, not just that, hey, we've picked some pretty key suburbs, and not just that. You talk about Tasmania, you talk about Brisbane, etc. But patience is also key here. We're not buying for a 1-year outcome. You know, in Gerald's experience there with Forestfield, or with Newnham in Tassie, or with Kalanga, or with Deception Bay property you bought. You know, these are 5, 10, 15-year holds still. We're trying to get a quicker than average outcome. But I guess going back to answer your question, Phil. You go set up a meeting, we set a strategy, and if you like the strategy and like what we've got to say, then essentially then from there we hit go, and then our job is to go and find the asset. And pretty much, and I guess Gerald could probably speak more to this, but our job isn't to find a property that day. We're trying to find properties in budgets, in markets, ideally unadvertised, so we can negotiate, we can hold the script. I mean, Gerald's got a property in Deception Bay that he's buying for himself right now, which I think from memory is a 4, 5, 6 month settlement. We're trying to get contract terms in our favours. Ultimately, that's where all of that work that we do in the background is, to try and get the product for the client.
So the key thing for me, and I think you made this point really well, Gerald, is if you're going to be serious about being a property investor, don't do what my culinary habits is that, you know, I want steak frites if I go to a restaurant. They don't have it, and you know you've got to put your hands
and leave.
Yeah, and leave. You've got to put yourself in the hands of the expert if you choose to go down that pathway, and that would be the same as going, I grew up in Blacktown, therefore I'll only buy properties in Blacktown because I know Blacktown. And I know the area, I know the streets, whatever. You know, you've got to think a lot more expansive. And the best property investors I know are very happy with braised beef cheeks and potatoes once they found and find out and have a realisation that it is a better product and probably a little bit healthier for you as well, I would imagine.
Sounds delicious, by the way. I'm hungry right now.
Yeah, we've got to do that. You've got to come and cook for us. Let's do a property cooking show.
We've done it before.
It's good. Thanks for coming in, mate. Really nice to meet you. I've heard your name banded around a fair bit, so it's really nice to meet.
Yeah.
And bring some additional talent into this podcast.
Thank you very much.
So you probably talk to him. Just go, how do people contact you guys again?
PurePropertyInvestment.com. They can catch up with Gerald if they want to speak directly with Gerald. They can speak with me, speak with Aaron, speak with Lena. Anyone at any given point in time. 1300 98 5428 is also
Trained operators are standing by.
Absolutely. Yeah. But unfortunately, it's not going to be, hey, call us and we'll talk to you immediately. We really do want to set up a meeting so we can actually have some preparation.
You've got to be prepared, right?
Yeah, we want to be prepared. This isn't a flippant conversation. This is important, and we want to take time and we want it to be meaningful.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, everyone. This is the Pure Property Podcast with Paul Glossop. We'll be back again next month for more of this and other discussions in and around property. And here's a challenge. Give us something. We'll make a property analogy out of it. See how we go. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.